Hi everybody, Dr. Kaylee Garrett-Zimmerman here, physical therapist. I am here today to do our part 3 of the diaphragm series. So part 1 was all about the anatomy and what the diaphragm does. Part 2 was just how to find the diaphragm on yourself. Part 3 today is going to be chatting about how to know if something is wrong with your diaphragm or if it's not going to function appropriately. In other words, how to assess the diaphragm yourself. I have my little notes here, so I apologize for that. But first and foremost, and I mentioned this on the part 2, is having the ability to tell whether or not you have pain when you palpate your diaphragm. And again, when you're from the sides and you walk to the middle, if you're pushing right where your diaphragm is, whether it's in sitting or whether it's in laying down, and you have pain just by pushing on it, chances are there's probably something that needs to be addressed there. Could be muscle inactivation, it could be a muscle imbalance, meaning there's a bigger muscle on the outside that's taking over. It can be the lack of the diaphragm to appropriately contract, and it can be muscle or adhesions, things like that, that are binding down on the ribs, preventing it from contracting. That can cause tension and pain. The next thing is, can you actually expand your diaphragm? If you can't, that is what we kind of consider an impairment, a diaphragmatic impairment. If you're not able to activate your diaphragm, that to me means that it's impaired, it's not functioning properly. So when you have your hands here and you walk to the middle and you breathe in, if you don't feel any activation and you only feel it in your chest or you only feel it way down low, you're probably not activating your diaphragm appropriately. When you're laying down, again, remember you should be able to actually feel the diaphragm move up and down. Now, what about other muscles that could be contracting instead of your diaphragm? So you have several different muscles that take over the action or the function of breathing. We call those your accessory muscles. If you're not using your diaphragm appropriately, they can technically activate in place of the diaphragm. So they're going to try to assume the diaphragm's position and help you breathe, when actually it's making things a little worse. Two of the muscles that I find that have what we call connective tissue or fascial tissue attachments to the diaphragm are the hip flexors, or the psoas specifically, or the latissimus dorsi muscle. Those are two that I've found in patients and with my expertise that have started to eliminate the ability of the diaphragm to function properly. So we're going to try to see if we can activate those two muscles to see what it does. For me, I'm a lats dominant person, so every time I activate my lats, I get discomfort in my diaphragm, and if I don't treat it, then I don't get to breathe properly. So what you're going to do is you're going to take one hand, you're going to put it in front of the table, mat, chair, wherever you're sitting, and all you're going to do is push down. And what you're going to notice is, where do you feel that contraction? You should feel it down here, you should feel it in the latissimus dorsi region, which again is going to be here on the side down to the ribs. If you feel it up here, or if you notice your body twisting, for me, I feel it a little more in the diaphragm. So it helps me activate the diaphragm, in other words. So when I contract that muscle, I can breathe a little easier. Now, why that happens is a whole different story, but that's one way that you can kind of determine that. Obviously, the best way is to do this laying down, laying like this. You can do this two ways. You can push down into the table to see what happens and then breathe. And I have a much better contraction there. Or you can have your arm up here and press against it with the other hand and then breathe. And again, I get much better contractions there. So for me, when we get to the treatment section, I'm going to use my lats to help me activate my diaphragm for that initial training session. The next muscle group that I want you to look into, and again, if you have any questions about that, drop them below or message me privately, and I would love to explain that a little bit more. The next muscle group that I would have you activate is going to be the hip flexors, or the psoas. In sitting, you can just press your knee up into your hand and take a breath, and then breathe out. Does that help you or does that hurt you? If you're feeling pain, if you can't breathe properly when you do that, then that muscle is most likely taking over for the diaphragm and not allowing the diaphragm to work properly. If you do that and then it's easier for you to breathe, then you may have a weak diaphragm that requires a little bit of activation first with those other muscles that are around the area. You can do this one in laying down as well. So if you're laying, hand here, and you're going to push your knee into your hand and then breathe. This one doesn't help me as much. That one actually gives me a little bit of discomfort. So what that tells me is that for my hip flexors, I probably need to stretch a little bit, get into the psoas, do a little bit of deep tissue, foam rolling, whatever it might be, in order to help decrease tension in that muscle. Because what happens when I contract that muscle, it makes it harder for me to breathe. So that tells me that I have a problem in this area that's not allowing this to function properly. Again, if that does not make sense, please send me a message or ask me in a private message, and I would love to discuss that with you further. So just as a quick review for those two, the lats, the big muscle, latissimus dorsi, if you're looking for specific anatomy, let me know. But when you push back, or when you're laying down and you're pushing down into your hand, if that makes it harder for you to breathe, then it's most likely taking over the function of your diaphragm. If it's making it painful, then you probably have some kind of tissue restriction in the lats muscle. If it makes it easier for you to breathe, then your diaphragm, with those connections with the latissimus dorsi, needs a little bit of assistance to begin its activation, then it's okay to use that initially. So again, when we get to that treatment session, we'll chat a little more about that specifically. Now, if you have any of the pain with the palpation, you can actually start on the side like we did with the ribs. I'm going to have you lay for this one. When you're laying down, you're going to palpate the very bottom of your rib cage and dig under your ribs a little bit. I want you to feel whether or not it's same on each side. Do you feel the same thing? Do you feel one that has tightness, one side that doesn't? Do you feel pain on one side? Do you have no pain? If you do have pain, or if you have tension, or if you notice a difference, you want to make note of that, because that's something that we can treat. That's something that you need to get assessed and determine why that impairment is occurring. So that's one other thing that you can do. The last thing, well, last two things that I want to discuss is, we discussed a little bit in part 2 as well about how to find your diaphragm. If you're here and you're noticing that when you breathe in, and your ribs are not going out to the side at all, they're only going forward, or they're not moving a whole lot at all, then you really want to kind of assess where the diaphragm is, what it's doing. It's probably not functioning appropriately, because with a good contraction of the diaphragm, the ribs are going to flare out because they need to open up to allow more oxygen to come in. If that's not happening, that can cause a whole slew of other issues. And the next thing that I wanted to chat with you about, other than just that lateral rib flare, or whether or not those ribs are moving with the breathing, is in order to activate your diaphragm to really see if you have any strength in it at all, you can take your fist, put it right where the diaphragm is, and again start at the bottom, go all the way to the middle of where your ribs are, right under the sternum. You're going to take your fist, put some pressure in it, and then take a breath. Or do your exercise. If you're running and you're having a hard time breathing, put a little pressure there, see if that doesn't help. I do stairs quite often for training, so I like to put my pressure here because it helps. If you need to, you can even tie a belt to keep activation around your diaphragm, just to remind yourself. What it does is it gives what we call proprioceptive cues, to your diaphragm. It tells your diaphragm through the nerve signals, all that good stuff, that hey, you need to work right now, you need to function, you need to contract, you need to relax. So if you're able to get that proper pressure there, that's going to help you with a longer workout regime, and you're going to be able to do more longer and faster. And the last thing is, you can take a ball as well, and you can use the ball on the table, or you can use your fist. And what you can do, same spot, fist, but you're going to lay on it. And the same connections we were talking about before, you can just bridge up here like this. Excuse the dog, he wants to help. And then relax back down. And that's going to give you a little bit more of that activation of the diaphragm, and it can actually help to relieve some of the tension that you might have. So, try out those things. We've talked about quite a bit today. Again, if you're confused, if you don't understand, or if all of those things were painful, let me know. There are several options for you, and as far as getting treatment for diaphragm breathing goes, you can go to a physical therapist, specifically pelvic floor PT. if you have pelvic floor impairments as well. I offer cash pay options, so if you are in the Tampa Bay area, I am very excited to announce that I now am taking patients, and I'm excited to bring that opportunity to you. I come into your home and we work in your home, and I would love to educate you more on this. Contact me if you're interested. Also am involved in telehealth, so if you want to hop on a video call, let me know. I would love to discuss this further with you. Leave a comment below. Let me know if you have questions. I'm super excited to have all of these new opportunities for you and to bring you this education. And I will see you on Wednesday for part 4, as far as going through some exercises that you can do to improve your diaphragm function. Have a great day.